Welcome back. I now have the pleasure of introducing a truly remarkable woman. Sam Sorbo is the author of They're Your Kids, an inspirational journey from self-doubter to homeschool advocate. Filmmaker, screenwriter of Let There Be Light, talk radio show host on Talk America Radio, and international model. She is fluent in 5 languages and studied biomedical engineering at Duke University before pursuing her career in modeling. In 2015, Sam won Best Supporting Actress from the Utah Film Awards and in her role in Just Let Go. Sam is married to Kevin Sorbo, actor and writer in the movie God's Not Dead, Part 1 and Part 2, among many other films. They have 3 children whom Sam homeschools, one of which we heard from yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sam Sorbo.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, the mic? Okay, good. Oh my gosh, so we've just had some interesting technical challenges, so this should be fun. I can't wait to see what happens now. First, I have to thank Ronnie so much for putting this on. Ronnie, you've done an amazing job. This has been a long-awaited thing. We were pulled away by COVID and postponed and moved and everything. And Chris, you've been amazing, especially the last 10 minutes. Okay, here we go. I also want to thank the Florida Citizens Alliance just for existing. This is a project, right? Because they have, there are people who want our children, and we have to stand in the breach. And so this is an emotional thing for me. This is something that I've been engaged in for quite a while. And I want to thank all of our presenters, Tina, especially Curtis, Rebecca, Kimberly. So far I know Alex is coming after me. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. They've done such an amazing job of sort of laying the groundwork, and I feel like, in a sense, I'm sort of batting cleanup a little bit, so you're going to hear a little bit of maybe a conglomeration of what we've already been hearing, but also I'm going to try to tie it up for you guys, and to that effect, to that end, I'm going to blow things up a little bit, and I'm hoping that I'm going to challenge you, specifically parents who are watching this, maybe specifically parents at home who just accidentally tuned into this, and they're seeing this maybe for the first time, and they're not used to this, because the people that are speaking at this event, we've been following this for a long time, and so when we see things happening in our culture and in our environment, it's sort of like, oh yeah, of course, that now. They're burning they're burning Bibles in Portland. Yeah, of course they are. Like, it just seems like, yes, it is sort of the natural progression of the Marxist movement. And it is a Marxist movement. It's not a Marxist movement. So we might as well call it what it is. But what I want to try to do today is change the way you think about education. I want to challenge your definition of education. And the reason that I want to do that is because you have no idea what education is. You're not educated. You've been schooled, but you haven't been educated. You think you want an education for your child, but you're sending them to school where they will be schooled and not educated. And I know that in your head you're going, what is she talking about? This is sort of ridiculous. I don't understand it. So before I get into all the nuts and bolts, little story, little Bobby, little homeschooled kid. He was a little bit of a misfit. And every day after school, he was homeschooled, so he would, he'd wait, he'd hang out. And after school, he'd go to the Five and Dime, and he'd wait for the kids from school to walk by. There's a little gang, little boys, and they'd go up to him and they'd say, "Bobby, you're homeschooled." And then they'd play a game with him. And they'd put down a dime and a nickel. Which one do you want, Bobby? And he'd be like, oh, I'm going to take the nickel because it's bigger. And they would laugh at him, and they'd laugh and laugh. And they played this game often. And one day, the owner of the bodega came out and said, Bobby, I don't understand it. I've seen you count money. You know that the dime's worth more than the nickel. Why are you doing that? And Bobby says, shh, I've saved $20 so far. Because Bobby was homeschooled. All right. So, you know, I'm a mother. I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 18. He spoke here yesterday. Very proud mom here. I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old. I'm a homeschool advocate, and now I've really become an education activist. I'm a radio talk show host. I'm a filmmaker. I've done a lot of things. Most things that I would tell you I would not ever have done if I hadn't started homeschooling my children. And you go, but taking on home education is like a big responsibility. Why would you say that allowed you to do all of those other things? And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that story. I'll also tell you that I went to Duke University. I studied biomedical engineering, and I thought that I was incapable of teaching my children. So I know that many of you are sitting there going, yeah, that's me. I'm not capable of teaching my children. And I'm here to tell you, of course you think you can't, because that's what you've been taught. You haven't been educated, you've been schooled. And part of your schooling involved teaching you everything that you couldn't do. Because unless you learned it from a teacher standing at a blackboard or a whiteboard lecturing you, you think you can't do it. By the way, all evidence to the contrary. Because if you really think about it, and you go through all the things that you do in your life, then you will know that you do a lot of things that you haven't ever learned to do. I probably should start the PowerPoint. There we go, okay. All right. Sorry, nope, that's too far. Here we go. Okay. So my mission is actually to empower parents to home educate, because I understand that they feel inadequate and they feel that they can't. And I want them to feel like they can, because home education is not just about your kids. It's about you also. And I just did a whole video series. I started doing videos when COVID first came down because I recognized, oh my gosh, the whole nation is homeschooling now. This is like awesome. Except that they weren't really, because you were homeschooling during COVID, which was like homeschooling under duress. It was like the worst sort of storm to be trying to homeschool in and trying to learn how to do this. But I've done a number of videos that are available for free on my website. Just go to samsorbo.com, and I did a whole series on homeschooling is easy, parenting is hard. Homeschooling is easy. It's the parenting part that's difficult. And so we'll get into that. There's a lot of pushback to this idea that you should home educate your children. Nobody thinks they can do it, least of all the people in charge of educating us. Have you noticed that? Teachers don't want you to home educate. You can't do it. So you really ought to ask yourself, if a goal of education is to learn something well enough to teach it, why do you feel inadequate? If you graduated high school, and even if you didn't, but let's assume that you graduated high school, why do you feel incapable of teaching a second grader or a third grader? You think it's rocket science? You think you're teaching them something that you don't actually know? What are you teaching a second grader that you don't already know? So why do you feel so inadequate? Because you've been schooled. That's job security. I mean, you got to hand it to the teachers and the teachers' unions, right? They've convinced all of us that we're stupid, that we can't educate a third grader? Are you kidding me? Come on, folks. I had a friend visit, and she was contemplating home education because, my goodness, what they're going to do to kids in school now, okay? With the masks and the gloves and the no touching and the no talking, and the desks being farther apart, and no leaving your desk, and no going to the lunchroom. And by the way, of course, the one question that everybody says after they say, well, I can't, they say, well, what about socialization? And I always say, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about education. You want to talk about socialization? That's a completely different thing. And you shouldn't be using socialization as a way of justifying sending your children into an educational institution. But if you want to talk about socialization, yes, homeschool kids are much better socialized than school children. So we could have that discussion. I don't think you want to. All right, so my son was in second grade. There were 5 problem children in his class. 5 behavioral problem children. I remember one of them swearing cuss words, second grade, at an adult, one of the other parents who was in the class. And one day I went in to pick Braden up, and the teacher said, oh my gosh, your son was such an angel today. I sat Matthew down next to him, and Matthew's really problematic. He was the cussing one. And Braden just kept him occupied for 45 minutes. Is that education? Because I'm going in my head, not his job. And then there's the thing about the book reports, and I was the guilty parent, so I helped out in class all the time, and I taught art, and I took the kids to the library, and I helped grade papers, and I would help clean up the class after school a couple times a week, and I was in constant contact with his teacher. And after 5 months of turning in book reports, 5 book reports, I'd never gotten one back graded. So I asked her, I said, how are Braden's book reports? And she said, quick as a wink, she said, oh, not very good. And I said, what? She said, no, not very good at all. And I said, that's so weird because I never heard anything from you. Does everybody hear that clicking? Is that my earring? Okay. Well, at the cost of beauty, the earring has to go. Hopefully that's better. It sounded like my jaw was clicking. I'm like, that sounds weird. Okay. So I started doing book report with him every day after school. Parents, if you do homework with your children after school, you are homeschooling. Okay? It's that easy. It literally is that easy. So don't give me, oh, I can't, I don't know how to do this. So we're going to talk about where education is today. We're going to talk about how should we define education. And then finally, what are your goals for your children? What are you hoping for from your kids' future? Where are schools today? It's a 12-year-old. She stabbed another student because of a family dispute. Multiple times. She's 12 years old. That's our schools today. There's a story about two young teenagers in a bathroom in a public school in Delaware. This happened a few years ago. And I was doing my daily 3-hour talk show on the radio, and I remember covering it. And these 2 young girls in middle school beat a 3rd young girl to death in the bathroom. Horrible, right? And I'm just covering it, and I got the news flash. Within an hour, the superintendent of schools was making a statement. And do you know what she said? She said, our schools are safe. All evidence to the contrary. Our schools are safe. You haven't been educated, you've been schooled. If you believe that, you're not trusting your eyes. You're not trusting your ears. You're not trusting your instincts. This is out of the UK. There's a dad who's now being called a racist and a bigot. He opposed the daughter's homework assignment. Her homework assignment was to write a letter to her family about converting to Islam. Dear family, I am converting to Islam. They literally want to put words in your children's mouths. That's not education, that's schooling. Kindergarten teacher, Rebecca talked about this, having the transgender ceremony. I had the mother on my radio program. She said her daughter had nightmares for months. Her daughter stood up in stood out of the tub in the bathroom, kindergarten, and her hair was slicked back. She started screaming, "Mommy, I'm turning into a boy." And this was a ceremony that the teacher had organized for the last day of school so that there would be no pushback, because then it's the summer and the parents are like, "Ugh, okay, whatever, it happened. There's nothing we can do." No, there's something you can do. You can choose to home educate. I don't like calling it homeschooling anymore. It bugs me. All right. Miss Kentucky's sexting scandal. She's a former Miss Kentucky. She's got 2 years in prison. This just came out. Sexting with her students. This is not one story. This is many, many stories. There's the story of the kindergarten teacher up in Seattle, and he manipulated so that he would get the classroom that had the private bathroom. And then he installed cameras. Kindergarten teacher. They only discovered it because they went to his place for a drug bust. And they found all the porn photos on his computer. But we don't call those porn photos when they're children. Those are crime scene photos. And then there's the story of the 10th grader that I recently had on my radio program. She was assigned a homosexual, pornographic, violent imagery poem by her 27-year-old teacher. The whole class was assigned the poem. It was a famous poem. They were supposed to be discussing controversial things. They were all assigned the poem. The publisher had seen fit to eliminate all of the swear words in the poem and replace them with ellipses. And so the teacher stood in front of the classroom and told them all the 4-letter words that they should write into the poem so that they could get the full effect. And so she told her dad, and her dad said, "That's an outrage." And he went to the school board, and he brought a lawyer, and they asked for an apology, and they said they wanted the poem stricken from the curriculum. And the school board said, "We'll give you an apology." So they made the teacher write a sorry, not sorry letter. But we're not going to strike this from the school curriculum because we think that it's appropriate for 10th graders to be exposed to homoerotic, violent imagery. And I asked the young girl about her experience, and she said basically that she had felt violated, that she was unprepared to see what this poem forced her to see. And then I said to her, "Okay, I understand that we had to schedule the interview to work around your school schedule. Is that true?" And her dad said, "Yeah, we're so proud of her because we allowed her to make the decision." She's 16 years old. We allowed her to decide to go back to school. She's talking to an atheist girl in her class, and we feel so good that she has that opportunity. Parents, where are you? Why is the dad not standing up for his young girl who said, "I felt violated"? Where's the parent in this? And why is he allowing her to make this decision? Why doesn't he grow a pair and say, "Not on my watch, you're not going back to school"? And if you want to affect change, why are you going into that system with basically the message that you condone what just happened, instead of, I don't know, maybe going on a school strike outside the school? There was a young girl who got very famous striking school. It was about climate change, I believe. It had nothing to do with school, but she got famous for it. What if Christians started striking schools when they discovered content like that? And all you have to do is open a book to find it. Right, Rebecca? And that leads me to this. Recently, Orange County School District sent this letter home to parents advising them there was no opt-out allowed for sex ed. They would not inform you when they were teaching your children about sex, and there was no opt-out allowed. Your children must learn about sex from the school district and from whatever teacher they decide to give your child. Do you feel your loss of freedom yet? Here are some segments from the one sexual health things that they're trying to teach. They're trying to teach improving female satisfaction. Yeah, that seems like reasonable biology fare. Safer sex and lubrication, including instructions on anal sex for grade school. I can't even say this stuff out loud. Safer sex toy use, sex, virginity, and abstinence, including the different ways to have non-sex sex. What the heck? Was that Bill Clinton something? I don't know. And then, of course, there's I Am Jazz, which is a book about a young transgender individual. And they have teaching instructions for the K through 5 classes for this book. By the way, 1, avoid introducing it as a book about a transgender girl. The last thing you want to do is play your hand. Instead, simply say it's a story based on the real-life experience of a girl named Jazz, who's actually a boy. That's hate speech. Goals are to expand the student's perception and understanding of gender and what it means to be transgender using developmentally appropriate language for younger students. How about developmentally appropriate no language and don't speak about this with my child? How about that? Better yet, don't send your kids into the public school environment. Just don't. So there's a story about a study that they did with people. They sat them down, they put them in front of a video, and the video played a white team and a black team, and the two teams were tossing a ball back and forth, and the participants were asked to count the number of times that the ball went back and forth. And in the middle of the video, there's somebody who came onto the stage with the people throwing the ball back and forth in a gorilla costume. And he comes out onto stage, and he does this little dance, and then he goes off camera. And so they asked the people who were counting the balls how many times they counted the ball passing, and did they see the gorilla, and 50% of them didn't see the gorilla. Over 50% of the people did not see the gorilla. Guess what, folks? You're not seeing the gorilla. You've been completely distracted. You've been sold a bill of goods. You've been schooled. So you're all thinking, school? Everybody needs school. Why? Why are you thinking that? Because you've been schooled. So I want to challenge you. Did you know you don't need to graduate high school to go to college? Did you know you do not need to graduate college to go to med school or law school? How could you say that? To go to med school or law school, pass the MCAT or the LCAT. How do you do that? Study. How about that? To go to college, pass the SATs. Or something. You've been schooled. You have these ideas that you think that you know. You don't know. And you've been distracted. And the gorilla's not dancing. The gorilla is devouring your children while you're counting the ball going back and forth. I love this one. Sorry. Didn't spot the dancing gorilla in the famous video. Why people suffer from inattention blindness. They actually have a name for it. It's inattention blindness. You can put that in your notes. And then we have the admission scandal. You think you're getting a college education. You think you're purchasing a college education for your kids. Our entire education system from the top down is completely corrupt at this point. These parents, they just bought their kids' way into college. Well, they'll pay. Yeah, what about all the ones that they didn't catch? I'm just saying, the system is broken. And they've done a study now, and I love this, Stacey Dale and Alan Kruger, that graduates of less prestigious colleges who were accepted into the elite schools that cost that much money, but they didn't go. They went to less prestigious schools for whatever reason. They wanted to be closer to home, or they didn't want to spend that much money. Within 5 years, their earning potential is exactly the same. Within 5 years out of school. So you think you need the degree from Harvard, you don't. You don't. Now, maybe if you can't get into Harvard without buying your way into Harvard, then maybe the degree is worth something to you because you couldn't go. Anyway. All right, so let's talk quickly about college prep and career readiness. College prep and career readiness is the motto, right? It's the mission statement of our schools. Is that what you want for your kids? A career? Oh, I just want my child to have a career. That's funny, because I want my child to be happy. I want my child to be in service. I want my child to be fruitful. I'm not so concerned about the career. And by the way, kids are going to change careers 5 times before they're 30 these days. The world's changing. It's a different place than when we grew up. But they're selling us on college prep and career readiness. So let's examine that for a minute. Career readiness, what's that? You're going to get out of college and you're going to have a career. How's that working out? I don't know. You've seen the headlines, right? So many kids moving back home because they can't get a job. So, okay, career readiness, not too successful. So let's go back to college prep. What's college prep? What does college prep mean? Well, we're preparing your child to go to college. No, you're brainwashing my child to think that he has to go to college. But I've just shown you, you don't have to go to college, necessarily. Bill Gates didn't graduate college. Steve Jobs didn't graduate college. Richard Branson didn't graduate college. So if you don't have to graduate college, why are we so geared to college prep? Why is the school telling our children and our parents, you have to go to college? Can anybody say, moolah, money? You're going to spend a lot of money to maybe get a degree in maybe something that's going to get you enough money to pay back the money that you spent and borrowed, right? It's called a pyramid scheme. Is that what it's called? Something like that, right? We need to really start thinking about these things. And then we have this. Thanks to the Babylon Bee for this, because the teachers' unions are now refusing to go back to school, so just a little levity. They're launching the Every Child Left Behind movement. All right. How did we get here? Do you know we didn't always have public schools? Massachusetts passed the first compulsory school laws in 1852. New York followed the next year. But it was only in 1918 that all American children were required to attend at least elementary school. Only in 1918. It hasn't been that long. This represents a chart of the 9 overhauls of our public education system in less than 30 years, each one purporting to fix the problem. And you know what? They all cost a lot of money, and they didn't fix the problem. And these are the people educating our children. These are the people educating us. Common Core is the last one up there. Oh my gosh, billions of dollars. Why? Because they wanted to sell new textbooks. And because of Marxist indoctrination. The results of that are disastrous. Test scores are down. Oh, but they said it was going to fix it. What about all the testing that they did for Common Core before they implemented it to prove to us that it was going to work? Oh, wait, no, they didn't test it. They didn't test it. They overhauled all of our children's curriculum on a whim. And we went along with it. Well, I didn't go along with it. But a lot of them did. And by the way, Common Core, because why wouldn't you want your child to be common? Isn't that what we want for all children? I mean, folks, come on, it's in the name. It's in the name. So where does this generate from? Well, the Communist 45. So they put into the congressional record the goals of the communists, which numbered 45. And by the way, if you look it up and you start reading their goals, you'll be like, oh my gosh, check, 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 check. They're checking off all the boxes. This one is number 17, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of the teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks. It also includes pornography, putting pornography in our schools, yes. Patriotism today is seen as somehow flawed. Have you noticed? That's communism. You've been schooled. Do you know the story of the elephant? When they have a baby elephant, they put a chain on his foot to keep him from wandering. And that's how they train him. And he tugs at the chain and it won't budge. And so he learns that if he has the thing on his foot, that he can't move anywhere. And then as he grows, because a chain's like that's not going to hold a large elephant, you'd think that they'd have to get a bigger chain, right? No, they use a string. Because the elephant's been conditioned to think that if his foot has something around it, he can't move anywhere. So they just have to use a string. They've got a string on your foot. You think you can't educate your children? It's because you have a string on your foot. And they've trained you. You can't fly. And guess what? They want to put a string on your children's feet too. Are you going to let that happen? You think you can't educate a child and you graduated from high school, but you're willing to sacrifice your child into a system that turned out the pathetic thing that you say you are? You think about that in your kids. You want your kids to be like that? Incapable, feeling inadequate? I had a woman sitting in my living room the other day. I said, what is your strongest objection? I know that you're struggling with this decision, with everything that they're doing with our kids. And she burst into tears. She said, I think I'm going to fail. You've been taught that failure's bad. That's what you learned in school. Failure's not bad. Ask Michael Jordan how many times he failed. Failure's what made him great. Your thinking has been affected. Have you noticed that you're seeking fairness instead of healthy competition? What's fair? I'll tell you one thing, life's not fair, so why are we looking at what's fair? Healthy competition makes everybody better. Used to be that was the United States. Remember when we won World War II? And then we went and we built up Germany and we built up Japan, and then we took over and now we own them? No. We built them up into healthy competitors, and it made the world a better place. But these days, think about it. We seek fairness. We want equality, like equality is the best thing going. And that's what our kids are learning in school. And that's why more youth voted for Bernie Sanders in the last election than for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump combined. It's because they've been taught that socialism, the Communist 45, socialism is grandpa with candy. And who better depicts grandpa with candy than Bernie Sanders? Although I'd hate to have him as a grandpa. All right. Have you ever interviewed a teacher for the job? Have you had the opportunity to go to the school and interview? What teacher are you assigning my child? Oh, Mr. Jones? Okay, I'd like to speak with Mr. Jones. You can't do that. You're not allowed to pick who teaches your child. Who signed up for that? That's an outrage, but we're just like, well, that's just the way they run the school, so this is just the way we do it. Stop it. Wake up. Teachers right now, they're asking, in California, they want to defund the police and cancel all charter schools. Why cancel charter schools? It's in the children's best interest. Why defund the police? It's better for learning. What? Come on, folks. This is absurd. Your children are going into these camps that are run by Marxists. They're run by Marxists. There's no way around this. I'm sorry, I wish I could say, oh, but not that public school or not that area or whatever. And you might live in, I don't know, Daisyville, and your public school is entirely Christians, and I don't know what, right? It doesn't matter because it's all in the curriculum. You know teachers are only allowed to teach what they're given. And what are they teaching? They're teaching children that they're accidents of nature and survival of the fittest. And they want to, by the way, the teachers want to defund the police. They want to cancel public schools. They don't cancel charter schools. They don't want to go back to work, and they want full pay and all their benefits. So I don't know. That makes perfect sense to me. Like, what? And now there's a movement to refund the taxpayers, not refund the money to the taxpayers, but take that money and then pay the parents who are going to home educate their children. No, the money should go back to the taxpayers. And the responsibility should be on the parents to educate their children, as parents should be doing from the beginning anyway. You have children, you should take it upon yourself to educate them. And I'll get to the reason why in a little bit. We used to have this is Teddy Roosevelt. A thorough knowledge of the Bible is worth more than a college education. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. We had our school system to teach us morals because they didn't want to force people to go to church, but they did want people to learn good morality. Well, they took that out of the schools shortly after they took the Bible out. You know, they didn't get rid of religion. They just replaced Judeo-Christianity in our schools with secular humanism. It's a different religion with different morals. The morals of, if it's good for me, it's right, and if it's bad for me, I hate you and I can kill you. That's basically the morals. We came from this, the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. And if you look in my book, I go into detail about how we developed our Declaration of Independence, and that it was initially a big statement against slavery. Our initial declaration was an enormous statement against enslavement of any form. And unfortunately, the slave states said that they wouldn't sign on, and so we had to fight amongst ourselves to tone down the rhetoric so that the slave states could sign on. But this was drafted by Thomas Jefferson, who did not like slavery. You can look it up. But that's not what they're teaching in school. In school today, they're teaching Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDOR, where everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, medical care. Sounds good, right? Okay, define food, define clothing, define housing, define medical care. Yeah, the devil's in the details. And so I want to read you a little bit from my book. This is Jimmy's story. Jimmy, where is it? Okay. Jimmy's taught that clothing and shelter and these things are a human right, but he lives in a cold water walk-up with his mom, who works 2 jobs to make ends meet. And his friend Cooper lives in a nice 3-bedroom house with a swing set. Cooper wears the most popular jeans and sneakers. And Jimmy's going, why does he get all that stuff and I don't? We're equal. We have equality, right? Come on, if you were a kid, you'd be thinking this. We both have the same rights, so we should both have the same clothing and the same homes. They're human rights. We're both entitled to them. I want a nice bedroom. I want nice clothes. Why do we have so much less? My mother must be stupid. Or she got cheated. What do you think? When I grow up, I'm going to make sure the system pays me back with even more for not taking care of us properly now. You have to think, where is this going? And what are we seeing in the streets today, folks? The rioting and the looting, these kids have been taught certain things. They want what's coming to them. How can you blame them? They've been schooled. It's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. We've lost that, haven't we? Education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. Is that where we are today? No, we have kids who stick their fingers in their ears because they literally can't hear the stuff that you're saying that disagrees with their worldview or their self-worth or whatever. They can't hear it. It is so painful to them. So what more proof do we need that the system's failing? Education should enable us to reason and make sound decisions. Are we in this period right now? Are we reasoning and making sound decisions? You know, I did a video recently about the cost, and it's interesting because I'm actually finding myself on the side of the Marxists today who don't want to open up the schools. And I'm saying, yeah, me neither. Stay home. It's terrible. But I did a video talking about this because they shut everything down without counting the cost, without any attention paid to the consequences of shutting it down. They were focused on one thing only, and have you noticed that that thing has now changed? So we were focused on flattening the curve. But that's not what we're focused on anymore because we did flatten the curve. So they've changed the goal now. The goal is to slow the spread, which is still not the goal that you think it is. What do you think of when I say we're slowing the spread? What do you think of when you talk about the masks and everything else? What are you thinking? That you're not going to get it, right? That's not the goal. The goal is slow the spread. They haven't changed it enough for you to, you think that the goal is that you're not going to get sick. But that's not what the goal is. And it's also not what they'll achieve anyway. Okay. So the state schools intend to make productive consumers. College prep and career readiness is actually a conflict of interest. You have a conflict of interest with the government educating your children. And the government has no intent to educate your children. So why are you allowing them to do so? Now you have this perfect opportunity. It's the perfect storm for you to take on the education of your children. I love this quote by Oscar Wilde. Nothing that is worth learning can be taught. Think about that for a minute. You need to set your children up to be lifelong learners, to be self-taught, because you self-teach everything anyway. You don't think you do, but when you go home with your homework, you're teaching yourself. Yeah, the instructor can show you a bit, but it's only through doing that you learn it. And frankly, you know, for parents who are like, well, I don't remember that stuff, I'm like, you know, there's a textbook, and it's just right there in the textbook. All you have to do is read the lesson. It's right there. It's right there. This isn't rocket science. And even if it were, it'd be right there. So what's your focus? What's your goal for your children? Education should be the process of learning something well enough to teach it. Number one, you want to nurture your children's innate curiosity and their eagerness to learn. Have you noticed that children are very curious, they're very eager to learn, and then they get to school and they stop? The school is not interested in your child learning that. The school is interested in schooling your child and making them behave. Number two, we're raising members of a new generation. We want to raise children who are able to speak the truth with love and learn anything they set their minds to and not be limited by the thoughts that the schools are putting in their heads, like you literally you can't do anything unless you've had a teacher. This is the word for bird in French. It's pronounced oiseau. Oiseau. I love that word, actually. It contains every single vowel. It only has 2 syllables. You could say it has vowels coming out the oiseau. You know, most of us think that there's a difference between math and science. I mean, math, science, and languages, humanities. Did you ever do that when you went to school? It was sort of like you bifurcated. You had the kids who were like the science geeks and the math geeks, and then over on the other side you had the humanities, like the language arts people. And we think that they're different because in school we're taught that all these things are separated into their own compartments. And I'm here to tell you that they're not. I'm really trying to make you to expand your thoughts about education. Math is a foreign language. I love that she laughed. Math is a foreign language. It has its own grammar. It even has its own alphabet, right? Numbers and symbols. But it's just a language. In fact, we even call equations math sentences. Okay, if you think about that for just a moment, then consider that everything is a foreign language. Music is a foreign language. Right? It's foreign until you learn it. Then you speak music. And then if you meet somebody who's a musician, you can say, yeah, no, you got the DCL coda or whatever. I don't speak music, but, right? The G clef, blah, 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 minor, major, all that stuff. It's a foreign language. Even buying a house is a foreign language, folks. When you bought your first house, did you know what you were doing? Did you hire a tutor to teach you how to buy a house or lease a car? Did you go on YouTube and look up how-to videos on how to lease a car or buy a house? No. You said, well, I think I'll need an agent, so you found an agent. And the agent said, well, are you looking at an ARM? And you're like, what's that? It's an adjustable rate mortgage. Oh, gosh, that's a new word for me, right? You learned the new language. And then you learned how to progress. You taught yourself how to buy a house or how to lease a car. You can teach yourself how to teach your children. And in the process of you teaching yourself how to teach your children, you will teach your children how to teach themselves. It's brilliant, which is funny because it's biblical. It's like God knew what he was doing or something when he said, teach your children diligently, right? Let's see. This is a quote in my book that I happen to love. This is Kevin Williamson in National Review Online. And he points out that basically the home educator is the one who is really bucking the system the most. The home educator is the one who's taking it on. And they're the most dangerous because they're the one who is thinking independently. That's what I want for you. I want you to be the one who's thinking independently. I want you to be the one who feels that responsibility and that self-worth, that growth in self-worth of a can-do person who accomplishes things. I know you think you can't, but you don't know education. And that's why I know you can, because you can learn education, and it's not schooling. All right, I want to give you a couple of homeschooling hacks and parenting tips. First of all, don't compare yourself to the school system. The school system's broken. I hope that I've made that point enough for you to understand that they are not your competition. Other homeschoolers are. But that's okay, you can keep up with them. Second, keep your eye on the prize. What is your goal for your child? A well-lived life, right? A giving person. Think about it, make a list. What is your goal for your child? Don't compare your life to someone else's highlight reel or sizzle reel or, their vacation videos. Homeschooling isn't always pretty. But homeschooling is easy. It's parenting that's hard. Please stop imagining that the school educators know better than you do. I would tell you that God entrusted you with the gift of your children. That's why I have a picture of a gift up there. They are a gift. And what's the first thing you do with a gift? You give it away for someone else to open, right? No. They're for you to open. I put my child back into school. I put 2 of my kids back into school a year and a half after I started home educating. I felt so insecure. I was failing. I knew it. My 2nd grader barely read. He was such a loser. Okay, he was really good at math. In 1st grade, he finished the 1st grade math book on Halloween. He was like, "Mom, I'm going to do 30 pages today." He loved it, right? But his reading was just abysmal. So I spent all of Christmas break teaching him reading. I got how to teach reading book, and we just went through the book, and they make it really easy for you. The curriculum makes it really easy for the parent to homeschool. Parenting is different, but the homeschooling part, really easy. And I did all of this work with him, and then I still felt like an abject failure, and so I put them in a lovely little Christian school, and it was a hybrid program, so I would homeschool 2 days a week, and then they'd go into class 3 days a week, and then after 6 weeks, I decided to go in to see, back up a minute. So I was dropping them off that day, the first day of school, and the gal said, "I want to test him to find out what classes I'm going to put him in," and I said, "Sure. Just so you know, he's really good at math. Like, he's advanced at math, but he's a remedial reader. What can I do? It's just I did the best I could. I'm a loser. So go ahead and test him. Just know that." She came back and she said, "You're right. He's very gifted in math. He was in 2nd grade, and his math was a 4th grade level." I'm like, yes. Not that it had to do with me. He loved math. She said, "But he is reading at a 5th grade level." And I said to her, I kid you not, I said, "So I'm the one with the problem?" And she said, "Yeah, kind of." And I left him there anyway, because I had convinced myself that that was what I needed to do. And after 6 weeks, I asked for a meeting with the teacher because I wanted to make sure that I was still performing, because I was a school student. And they teach you in school that you have to do this and that, and then you get your gold star. And that's what I've done my whole life, because I've been schooled, just like all of you. So I went in to meet with the teacher, and we sat down, and for 10 minutes she told me how well behaved my son was. And I'm like, "I know he's well behaved." She said, "Oh no, I put my worst behaved student next to him to see if he would rub off on him, and it worked. He was better behaved because he sat next to your son Shane." Again, not his job. And I realized she's a behavioral person. Teachers are just behavior modification specialists. She wasn't interested in educating him. I wanted to hear that he was disruptive. I wanted to hear that my son was like, oh, I know the answer to that. "Oh, teacher, can I ask a question?" I wanted to hear that. I want my children educated. I want them uplifted. I want them inspired. I want their curiosity piqued. And she was telling me how well behaved he was. Do the hard thing. You're already homeschooling your kids because you're doing homework with them, and because if you're a parent, you should be paying attention to what they're learning and making sure that they're learning it. Parenting is hard, not homeschooling. I don't believe that kids belong in an institution, especially boys, not to single out boys. But I think it's a terrible thing to put your boys in an institution every day. Certainly now with COVID, I wouldn't be thinking about putting my kids in that environment. But do the hard thing. And the reason that we do the hard thing is because it's hard. And because in doing the hard thing, we prove to ourselves how capable we are. And it is an amazing thing for you to discover how capable you are. And you can do that if you choose to parent your children. And parenting means educating them. It's hard to determine metrics because you've been so conditioned to follow the school guidelines. It takes years to come out of the having been schooled problem that we have in this country now because we've all been schooled. But just hopefully remember this slide and understand that your metrics, I thought my child was remedial in reading, and he was reading 3 grades ahead of grade level. So your metrics are skewed. By the way, I had nothing to base that on. I was just like, well, he halts sometimes when he reads. Like, he certainly isn't fluent. He was 2nd grade. What was I thinking? Your metrics are skewed. My metrics were, anyway. Doing the hard thing involves choosing to do it because it's hard. You have to make that, you have to embrace that, embrace it. So Kevin and I just wrote a book called True Faith, Embracing Adversity to Live in God's Light. And part of it is because we realize that if you embrace the adversity, then you learn to enjoy the struggle. And you should enjoy the struggle with your children. We're learning Latin. That's hard. It's not easy, but it's worth it because it's hard and because we come out the other side. If you want to lose weight, you have to learn to like being hungry. It's not easy. It's just what you have to do. Everything is more interesting when you go in depth. Understand that everything becomes more interesting when you go in depth. Learn to enjoy saying no. These are parenting tips. Please, learn to enjoy a simple no. You're the parent. Parent your child. Your child wants to go back to school even though she felt violated? No. I can't believe that he would do that to her. I can't believe a father would do that to his daughter. Okay. Learn to stop saying, okay. We're going to have lunch now, okay? You need to clean up your room, okay? You're asking your child's permission every time you say, okay. Why are you asking your child's permission? You're the parent. Parent your child. Alex is laughing. Bribery works. It's okay to bribe your child. Just don't go overboard. I used to bribe my children with single Skittles. Boy, they would jump through hoops for a Skittle. Discipline works. And I say this in my book. Discipline is as much about the parent as it is about the child. So parents say, I like the discipline to homeschool my child. Maybe you should get some discipline for yourself then, huh? You expect your child to be disciplined and you're refusing to discipline yourself? Always follow through on consequences and make the consequences fit, right? A lot of people believe that home education will require too much discipline. This is from my book. Their concern is twofold. They may not be disciplined enough to hold their children to account, and they are afraid their children will lack the discipline necessary to uphold their own end of the bargain, and they're wrong on both counts. In fact, they miss the point entirely. It's parenting that requires discipline within the parent and the child. And that's why I say homeschooling's not hard. It's the parenting that's hard. I'm having trouble too. So homeschooling helps with that lack of discipline. Homeschooling helps with parenting. Homeschooling helps with the relationship that you have with your child. The institution, the public school, hinders it. You want to set yourself up for failure? Send your children to the institution every day. And then finally, be the hero. If you want to take some time off, take some time off and say, today, we're going to take time off. We're going to go have fun. Oh my gosh, really? Yes, your dad's the hero today. We're going to go do something fun, right? You're driving the train now. That's the fun part. All right, I think the timing got a little bit off, so I think that I need to be finishing up. So think about, how should we define education? What's your goal for your children? My next book, I'm going to write about parenting. I'd like you to sign up for emails. If you go to samsorbo.com, then we'll be doing emails because social media is closing down slowly. And so you can go to samsorbo.com and connect with me, and I'm happy to answer questions. I love getting questions. I do videos to answer parents' questions on home education. I have a ton of videos over there, understand that it should be about relationship. It should be about the relationship that you have with your child. You ought to understand that your relationship with your child is the greatest example of the relationship of God to you, and you give that to your child so that your child, when he grows up, he has that relationship with God the Father. Education isn't what you think. It's bigger and better than you've been taught, and you can discover it for yourself. Because, by the way, education is available to everybody now. We have the internet. It's right there at your fingertips. So what have I just been teaching you? I've been teaching you about education, right? I've been teaching you about homeschooling, right? What's my accreditation? Did you know that I didn't graduate high school? Did you know that I didn't graduate college? Shh, don't tell anybody. What's my why are you listening to me? And yet I've taught you things today, right? My point is, I didn't go to school for home educators and get some sort of degree to teach home education because I don't need one. Because I learned by doing, and now I know well enough to teach. And that is the education paradigm that we have absolutely lost. We have murdered it in our schools. And so if I've done anything today, I hope that I've shown you that, and that I've somehow imparted an idea for you that you are more powerful as an individual than you think you are, that you are uniquely chosen by God for your children, that you are asked to educate them yourself, and that means directing their education, because you can't teach anybody anything. They have to learn it themselves. You can only bring the horse to water. You can't force it to drink. And you're powerful, despite the fact that you've been schooled. So I hope this talk has empowered you to feel more confident, to put on your armor, to fight for your children. And God bless you. And God bless America. Thank you so much.
I think we have just a little bit of time for a Q&A. If anybody has questions, please come on up and feel free to ask that. I'll start off with one. What was your aha moment to finally pull your kids out for good, and how did you find the curriculum that you use now?
Curricula came to me from various places. I was lucky to find really great resources right off the bat. And then other things that came to me, I joined a co-op. They have a fantastic curriculum. It's Classical Conversations. And I will say that I told the story of putting my kids back into that small Christian school after a year and a half, and they were 6 weeks in. And I'll tell you this, they were 6 weeks in. I had the meeting with the teacher. She had come from public school. She was predominantly focused on behavior. That didn't work for me. I took the kids back out, sat down at the kitchen table to start math, and my son started crying. And he said, "Mommy, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's too hard." And my heart broke because I was just like, why? What did they do to him? He was my math whiz. He loved math. And he sat there and he was like, "I can't do it." And so I just sort of gingerly, I took the book away. I'm like, "That's okay. We don't have to do math. Let's do some SNV stuff. Let's do some grammar. Let's do some other stuff." And I let it go for like a week. And for a week, I was like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? My math whiz, and he's broken. They ruined him." And I just let it go for a week because patience is a very important ingredient. By the way, it's a virtue, in case you didn't know it. And so for parents out there who say, "Oh, I don't have the patience," I'm like, well, maybe God gave you your children to teach you patience, okay? We got to learn patience. It's not something that just comes naturally. It's something that's learned. I was patient for a week, And a week later, I put the book in front of him, and we went back into it like nothing. Well, I backed up a couple chapters, and we went back into it like nothing. And he doesn't even remember. So I don't know what happened. But that was the point where I went, oh my gosh, I'm never going to give my kids to someone else that I can't supervise, that I can't know exactly what's happening. They're too precious. Your kids are too precious. Why do you agree to take your child down, a first grader? And I remember doing this, my first grader, and we moved for the school, so we got down there, first day of school, they'd assigned the teacher, and somebody had said to me, Braden got a great teacher. She's awesome. Everybody loves her. You know why they love her? Because she kept a bowl of candy in her classroom. Everybody loved her. I'm serious. And we walked down there, and you're not allowed to change the teacher. They post it the day before class starts so that there are no challenges, so that nobody's coming in saying, oh, I want a different teacher. You have no idea who this person is, and you just turn your child over to a complete stranger, and you're like, well, safety in numbers, right? There are 30 kids in the class. It'll be fine. Think you've been schooled. It's my new catchphrase.
Thank you.
I love that.
I love it too. How do you convince parents and people to push back against the lies, liberalism, anti-Americanism? How can they, and are we too far gone?
We're never too far gone. You're an individual. There is a truth. Yes, the left is trying to tell us that there is no truth. Think about that for a minute. That is the line of the left, that there is no truth. If there's no truth, that's a lie. What? Come on. And it's funny because I've just been doing a book study with the C.S. Lewis book, The Abolition of Man. And that, of course, that came out around World War II. This is a fight this is an eternal fight. This is an enduring fight. This is, and it's never too late. As long as you know the truth, you must stand for the truth. And if you decide not to stand for the truth, then you'll have to live with those consequences on a personal level. I think that's the best way I can answer that. I'm not sure how else to answer that.
Thanks, Sam. You know, part of the Marxist agenda was to disintegrate the family or to really damage the family. And so the reality is we have a lot of single parents out there. So I'm wondering if you can give some kind of advice or hope to single parents who might be listening and saying, I really, really, really want to homeschool, but I have to work. Or so is there some kind of a co-op or people in the neighborhood they can join, something they can do so
Absolutely.
that they can.
Well, now, because of COVID, and honestly, if you're somebody who likes to see silver linings, there's a silver lining to COVID. A lot of parents are stuck now because they can't send their kids to school, and so they have to homeschool. And so we have these micro schools, or what are they called? COVID pods, or things like that are sprouting up everywhere. I'm working with some people to try to establish kind of a national database to try to help parents find teachers or find, network. And there are co-ops. Classical Conversations is a co-op. What we have to understand is education is not 8 hours a day. It's not at a blackboard. It's not at a desk. In fact, there's a great YouTube video out there of a young boy, I think he's 13, and he's an astrophysicist or something, and he says, I hacked my education. He just went on YouTube and he learned a bunch of, it's all out there. But we have this pressure on us from having been schooled to think that it has to be a certain way, and it's different than that. And it shouldn't be that way, because that way is the wrong way, demonstrably the wrong way. So for the single parent, you hire a tutor, you hire somebody for your kid, or you join forces with another parent, or you join a co-op, or there's so many different ways to get it done. I had a friend whose wife didn't want to homeschool, so he just hired retired school teachers, and he chose a curriculum, and he hired a teacher for each of his 4 kids. And they came into the house for 4 hours every day, and the mom just cooked and did her thing, whatever that was. And His oldest graduated Harvard, which I wouldn't send my kid to Harvard, but he wanted to, and and she's doing very well. So I had a long conversation with a father whose son was failing 7th grade, and they were going to hold him back. And he said, "No, you're not going to hold my son back." And I get emotional with this story because I find it so amazing. His wife refused. He was married, but his wife refused. So he worked nights for a year. And every morning he would come home from work and he would educate his son. And they went through 7th grade and 8th grade. And then in 9th grade, they put his son back in school. So it's not that you can't do it. It requires sacrifice. But you know what you get when you sacrifice yourself for your children? You find out who you truly are. And if you're not willing to sacrifice yourself for your children, you find out who you truly, really are.
That's it for the Q&A. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you
so much. Great. There's nothing in this world more precious than a child. We treasure the immeasurable value and undeserved gift of children. God calls on all of us to protect the minds of our children from those who regard them as commodities. Marxist indoctrination, sex trafficking, and the enticement of the pop culture industry are crimes being committed against our children even as we speak. And that's why we are here. Would you join us in an effort to rescue them? Text the word rescuing to 50155 to donate any amount. Thank you.